right. So let's just take a moment and sink into the space. Let yourself breathe freely as your senses sink onto the room in which you're in. We'll give people a few minutes to come in, but my guess is this will be sparsely attended because it's the day after Christmas and right before New Year's. But that's fine. Sometimes when there's less people, you pull forward teachings of greater rarity. Now, as always, if anybody has anything they'd like addressed, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll make sure I get to it. Otherwise, we'll just see what comes forward. Attention at the forehead and crown, eyes open, taking in the entire room at once. You aren't hard focusing on any one thing, and yet you're still present. And all you have to do, all that's being asked of you, is that you come to a stop. That you stop pushing forward and pulling back. That you take your hands off the wheel and just let the moment run itself. To just breathe in this moment. Your habits will come in to tell you that you have to take control, that you have to plan the future moments, or compare this moment to a past moment. And you just stop all of that. And let's just be in that free space together. this stopping place is the doorway to reality. Most people will see reality, but it's just like a baby's eyes opening the first time. They don't really understand what to make of anything. With this, you just know that you're comfortable, and that somehow all your problems have lifted off of you. This is the state nobody teaches well. So this is what I focus on with you, because you have an entire world trying to teach you the rest. And the components of the rest are also tied into culture, that I mostly just try and give you this core piece. Because most of the people who talk about it are not really able to transmit it in the same way. They can guide you down intellectual channels, which is fine way to teach. But you can get there faster when you're connected to someone who can transmit it. However you get there is fine. In spirituality, you have reality, which is this silent, pregnant backdrop of nothingness that contains the potentiality of anything you could ever dream up, but itself is empty. Paradox, really. It's empty and it's pregnant at the same time. And it expresses itself through illusion, through arisings. And those arisings are not unlike the way a child out of boredom starts talking to their dolls and pretend that the doll is talking back. And they start to get a bond with that doll. Start to care what happens to it. Start to wonder if it's lonely if they left it somewhere. This big one pregnant emptiness starts playing. And its grand play is to split itself into two, into itself and an other that it can talk to. The initial split is cruder than that, blunter than that, but it splits and splits and splits. Because that's what duality makes possible. Until you have this intricate web of arisings that becomes more and more sophisticated, more and more populated. It steps into the Tals, lets its intelligence infuse itself into the Tao so that it can experience the world it's created for the Tao. And it walks around and it talks to itself through all these different little forms that it's filled. Eventually, the world it's created becomes so engrossing that the part of it that got trapped inside the little form it was filling forgets what it is. It forgets that it's playing. And now it's just a doll living in a world. It's what it wanted. There was nothing else to do. And it facilitates expansion and growth and so now here we are. These beings trying to remember what originally happened. So you've got some people like me who try and take you back to the source. And that's what some people need. For some people, you know, that feeling that you feel when we go there, that good feeling that keeps you coming back to a class like this. That's the reverberation of a remembering. At a deep level, you know that's what you are. You know that you're home. And you know that no matter what's happening in the story of the Tao, the energy that's enlivening all of it is fine, no matter what. Fine no matter what doesn't make for a very good story. If you're going to play dolls, you got to play better than that. So the stakes in our storylines are very high. Stupidly high, really. And the pain just adds so much more dimension to everything. But in any moment, you can remember what you are. Most people are so far removed from that moment when they forgot that they have to spend quite a bit of time outside of the story to remember that that's what they actually are. But that's one part of spiritual life. The watering of remembrance of reality. Any path that's missing that is incomplete. Another part that is useful is learning how to manage the illusion. And so you have paths that are designed to untangle you from your selfishness. Because when you think that that world is real, you start to enter into a self-preservation mode. And that self-preservation mode makes it hard for you to wake up to what's actually happening. It's a very loud storyline, very engaging. And so they turn your attention to kindness. They turn your attention to doing unto others as you would have done unto yourself. They turn your attention to, at the higher levels, selflessness. There are some paths that don't do that, some paths that just do what I do, and they're often very critical of the paths that promote manipulation of the dream time, manipulation of the illusory state. They just think you should throw it all away. I disagree. I don't think it's a problem. But you do need to learn how to move through it. This is one of the gifts of shamanism, actually. Shamanism approaches it through a form of energy economy. They state that most people, through their uncontrolled emotions, are hemorrhaging energy. And so you learn how to start containing your energy by reacting differently to the stories around you. It takes a certain level of intelligence to be able to work with that. In a pinch, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself works too. Or devotion. Just giving up your will entirely to a higher power can work too for managing the illusion. What it does is it elevates you out of some of the lower stuff that's so engaging, and it makes it possible for you to spend more time in reality and to see reality flowing through the illusion. You can actually get to a point where you can stare at a physical object, if such a thing exists, and you can actually see its nature as an arising out of that pregnant emptiness. The further you go with that, the more you come to realize that nothing is outside of you in the illusion, that everything is a direct response to how you're assigning meaning. And I understand how your brain hears that. It hears it like, oh, something's happening and you're assigning meaning to it. But that's not actually what I mean to say. The assignation of meaning is what's happening. It's not being laced over much of anything. But just let that go in. It'll blow up in your head at some point when you're ready for it. One of my primary teachers in the beginning of my spiritual life used to talk about life as a dream. one of those teachings that is kind of sexy, right? People love to think of life that way, and it pulls people in. But people don't really understand it. You know, she said that this life you're living is a dream. And if you asked her what a dream was, a dream is a succession of images passing through the mind. And it leaves you going, wow. But not much more than that. Whenever we would ask her to explain it further, she always kind of got out of it. But as I've moved along, I've come to understand what was meant by that. I wonder if I can explain it better. When someone says, when you read a spiritual teaching about life as a dream, at first when you're looking at it, there's this sense of like, okay, I can kind of see that. Yeah, I've got this inner dialogue and these feelings that I'm projecting over what's happening. But you kind of walk away going, you know, it's not a perfect metaphor, is it? Right? In a dream, a real dream, it's not like that. In a real dream, the second you have a feeling, it's projected on the screen of the mind. It's a direct relationship between your individual mind and the dream. And so when people hear that life is a dream, it's a nice thought, but there's always just that little kind of piece that doesn't quite catch. For me, I remember walking away from that teaching. You know, it was never really explained in any deeper way, and I knew that there was some truth to it, but it seemed like an imperfect metaphor. I now know that it is a perfect metaphor, but I got there through totally different routes. You know, that practice that we do every now and again when I need to show you something about reality, and we go through and we systematically remove the identity of everything around us. Right? Remove the identity of a table, remove the identity of the walls, you know, set the walls free, let them become whatever they need to become, and you just one by one release everything in your environment until you eventually release your own body, release your own name, and you're just left in that open space. And this whole world goes away without ever once even having to disappear. You've noticed that, right? If you really do it when I ask you to, you'll notice that nothing's left. Nothing's missing, but nothing's left. Just consciousness. You let go of everything. What are you letting go of? You're letting go of the meaning that you assign everything. When you're done, and I take a breath and shift my position a little, and it sounds like we're going to talk, it all starts coming back into being, doesn't it? maybe first you'll notice the lamp, and there's a lamp there, and that lamp is connected to the story of the room because this room has a series of things in it, and that thread just gets very naturally pulled. And suddenly you're just back in a room. There's a part of you that is liberated and open. When you go down to speak to your spouse and they say something that always pisses you off, then that lights up a bunch of other things, and before you know it, you're right back at your normal set point. But life is a dream is not an indirect metaphor. It's something you have to catch, and you catch it by paying attention. You can catch it partially through the implications of what I've just said, an experience that everyone here has worked through with me, I believe, at some point. And you can work through it on your own. Right? If the world disappears when you stop holding it in place, what does that mean? If it comes back when you start remembering the names and meanings of everything around you, what does that mean? But I get it, right? I mean, that's like a meditation trick, right? We're stopping everything. We're doing something very strange, not really part of the flow of life, nothing you would ever do in your nighttime sleep dream. Except you would. We call that deep sleep. But from your experience, still, something kind of set off to the side. But you could sit in a moment in your actual day and you could catch yourself responding. How am I doing? Well, I don't feel quite right. Why don't I feel quite right? Well, my husband is suffering. He's got all this pain and all these difficulties, and it puts him in a bad mood. And, I don't always like the tone of voice that comes out when he's in a bad mood. And I've got this work to do, and the work is hard and annoying and not something I feel like doing. What am I doing in those moments? But dreaming. I'm assigning meaning on the fly, just like you do at night when you're asleep. I've seen other people walk into a room with me where I am sitting there crying and they turn on the TV and they don't even notice. It's not part of their dream. They're not being mean. It's just like they don't, part of their dream is not to see how I'm doing. Or they'll see you going through a hard time and their dream is not, oh my gosh, you're suffering, are you okay? Their dream is, are we okay? You're being kind of distant. There's so much to see in any moment, but really no. There's just this intricate web of mental filters in you that you can pull out to project onto the screen of life. And you do it within the context of the story that you've built. You would be hard-pressed to really prove that any of it exists outside of your head. But don't take my word for any of it. Watch. Keep meditating, and then when you live your life, watch. And you'll start to catch it. It might take you 10 years. It might take you 15 minutes. But you're dreaming in real time. And if there's something you don't want there, all you really have to do is stop believing that it needs to be there. Shift your attention, and for you, it won't be there. Will it still be there for them? You don't know. There's actually almost no way to know. I will say that I've had difficult people in my life who have had we've had a difficult relationship. And the beauty of being on a spiritual path with people is they rise above themselves. And when that happens, sometimes they rise out of their issues with you. And I remember once someone doing that, and in that moment, I forgot all of our problems. So I do believe that as consciousness, we are filling many, many people. But it is one consciousness. And I do believe that when the story changes for you, it changes for others too. But don't worry about that. Catch it. First, it looks like you're participating in something. First, it looks like you're assigning meaning over an objective reality. But from what I've seen, that reality you're looking at is the meaning you're assigning. And that is what is meant by life as a dream. Does that make sense? At least intellectually? It's the explanation no one ever gave me. So what does that mean? If that's true, and you'll have to see for yourself over time, that puts a hefty responsibility on your shoulders for your own life. Can you see that? It means there's no longer anything to fix in anyone else. It starts and stops with us. It means that you are responsible for your heaven or your hell. If I were a student going, but what about? I would probably at this point be saying, but what about all the sensitivity I feel? I feel everybody. All their difficulties take place within my body. But if you really watch, even that becomes a product of how you interact with people. I still deal with it, but it's gotten much better. You learn to connect in very different ways. It's not perfect. I haven't mastered it. But the fact that I can improve it makes me think that probably when this is done being examined, it falls under the same category as everything else. So let's make this the year. Let's make this the year that you start to catch this process. The few people who will hear this teaching today. Start to notice how your attention is set to look for certain things that you expect to be there. And when you find them, shift the narrative in your head. You didn't just find them, you just projected them onto the screen of your life. You're dreaming. A lot of it is subconscious, but you can still feel it. You can feel it when something that is yours is rising up to create the same old tired day. We all do it. I do it too. But the spiritual path is to recognize that you do it and actively open up in the face of it, own it, and open up in the face of it. See if you can choose a different road. You can shift your attention to something else, or you can look at the same thing but from a different angle. Right? Here's, these people who are always so angry. A step up from that is these people are hurting or these people are scared. Just as true. But it doesn't make you feel like a victim. Do you see? These people are opportunities for me to give of myself, for me to flow something beautiful towards them and just treat them with kindness. Unconditionally. That's an option too. You don't have to do any of it. It's not a meritocracy, but you have options. Sometimes you need to just be done with something in your life. And so it's about shifting your attention. That's okay too. What matters is that you recognize it, you own it, and you choose. So take some time before this new year. Take a look at your life. Ask yourself what you're ready to own. And set yourself up to catch this process in the act. All right, everybody. If there are any questions, I am happy to answer them. If not, why don't we just sit together quietly for a while? Just let it sink in. Nothing to think about. Just let it permeate and take root. Attention at the forehead and crown. Anchor your eyes, but let your attention take in the entire room at once. relax within this space. If you can relax, your body comes along for the ride. Okay, everybody. This week, you're going to watch this life that arises from the pregnant emptiness, and you're going to watch your role as the dreamer. Notice how your expectations direct your attention, and leave a door open to understand what you're seeing as a projection of your expectation, as opposed to an objective event that you are interpreting. Just leave that door open and spend some time sitting still too, so that it all has a chance to process. Any questions before we end for the night? All right, guys. Happy holidays. I hope everything's going well, and I will see you next Thursday.